Okay, we've looked at the bully, we've looked at the target, we looked at the plus and the minus, so to speak, the split personality, as I called it, the bad news, the good news. Now let's look at the bystander. There's quite a lot to say about the bystander. The bad news on the bystander is the bystander learns to turn off empathy. That's one way of dealing with seeing injustice, seeing crime, seeing bullying. They turn a blind eye to injustice, avoid standing up for those being downtrodden, and lose sensitivity and sense of injustice. It's a problem. Statistics on bullying show, we mentioned this earlier, the average high school in America has 15% of its population, either the bullies or in that 15% are the bullies and the targets, which reveals, as we said earlier, the 85%. Majority. Whoa, way majority. And that's incredible news, because now the bystander knows that he's part of the vast majority. But the problem is that each individual in that 85%, if they can't stand up or haven't been trained beforehand by the teacher, by the parents, in school assemblies, by the principal who's building in the culture of the school, in this school, this is how we deal with bullying. We recognize that the vast majority of the class don't want to be bullies or bullied. And at least 85%, probably I would guess in the Jewish population is probably in the 90s, are bystanders who don't want to be part of that. But in recognizing what's my obligation over here, in my identifying myself, in not following my thoughts, but asking Rabbeinu Shalom, what's your opinion about the bystander? How do you want me to identify myself and act as a bystander? And in that, we can train our children in advance of experience bullying in the classroom, in recess, in the corridors, getting on the bus, getting off the bus. We want the kids in advance to know who they really are. We mentioned that the Torah is extremely emphatic about the bystander. There's a mitzvah in the Torah, there's quite a few. Al tamed al dam re'echa. Do not stand by idle when the blood of your brother is being spilled. And if you jump in to save where you really can, oh my gosh, Moshe Rabbeinu's only description is that he was a bystander who would not stand for injustice. Really? And who did he become? That's the only description the Torah gives us from the time he's born till he's chosen as the leader of the Jewish people. And it's in 4 different instances. It's glaringly obvious that Hashem is spelling out, look who you can be if you see injustice and do something about it. It's not simple, but we're going to look at that a little bit closer in a few moments. We have the mitzvah which we've mentioned a few times, lahatzil, the nefesh of the nirdav, to save the life of the person being chased, but nefesh haroidef, if necessary, by taking the life of the roidef, the person who's bullying, the person who's chasing. We mentioned this a few times. The Torah is obviously extremely emphatic because there's no trial, no witnesses, and you can take the law into your own hands and kill the guy. That's extremely exceptional, but it's a reality. And you have to be prepared for that, because you can't say, oh yeah, what does Shulchan Aruch say about that again? And start searching in Rambam and the codes and Shulchan Aruch to see what's the din of a nirdav. No, you got to know in advance that if you see a situation where someone wants to do mishkav zachar, Rahman al-Islam, with another man, and that man is running away from that sick mind, you have a mitzvah to harm that sick person or actually take his life. Because the aveira he's about to do is way worse than him losing his physical life. Can you believe that? Yeah, it's going to cause him much worse Gehenna than if you take his life right now. Oh my gosh, really? Yeah, and if you see someone running after an Isha to abuse her, you have a mitzvah to harm that person, or if necessary, kill them. No warning, no witnesses. You don't bring them to Beis Din, you just kill them. You don't try and arrest them, you kill them. Really? Now, maybe I should be putting some sort of disclaimer over here that you should speak to your attorney or your physician before you take this medication, or before you, but hey, the Torah is telling us guidelines for knowing what am I supposed to think as a bystander. Oh, I better not get involved here. Or much worse, hey, oh my gosh, let me get this on my phone and I'll put it on Instagram, I'll put it up on YouTube. Boy, I'm going to get I might get a million hits. What? Someone here suffering, I'm celebrating what it looks like on camera? You got to be out of your mind. Are you joking? And this happens every day. But the Torah is very clear. No, bystanders have a job, have a duty, responsibility. Jump in, save that person's life. A third example, the Torah gives us a warning against hurting other people with words. Especially, the Torah singles out people who are naturally vulnerable. An almana and a yisayma. Inu yom lalim, lo yitainu ish es amisai. Don't hurt another person with words, and especially kol almana v'yasam lo yita'anun. Do not anguish a widow or an orphan. Bad news. Hashem is going to take their side. Don't start up. Now, why is the Torah going out of its way? It should apply to anybody. Yeah, but the Torah wants you to know that someone who's not protected, because they don't have a husband or a father to advocate and defend, protect them, are much more vulnerable. They're wearing, I'm a target. Not to invite you to hurt them, but the Torah says, I want you to know they are targets so that you will be that more protective of them, to be that more sensitive not to hurt them and to take their side in any situation you possibly can. Now, happens to be in Beis Din, you're not allowed to show favoritism to an almana or a yasam in din, because you gotta just paskin what's the halacha. But before you get to Beis Din, you should come up with any possible compromise you possibly can to protect and make sure that an almana and a yasam are taken care of. Says the Chafetz Chaim, even though it's true the Torah singles out these two as examples of people who are vulnerable, says the Chafetz Chaim, it applies to anybody who's vulnerable. So for sure, a child on a bus, on a school trip, on camp, where his mother, father are not there. He's staying by a friend next door, or his parents are away and he's staying with cousins or who else. There's an extra mitzvah, whoever are the guardians in that situation, to be extra cautious not to hurt that person, because they feel very vulnerable. They can't tell you that, they're only kids. The kid in the classroom doesn't have his mother or father to protect him. So I, as a teacher, a Rebbe, have a greater responsibility to watch out for what the Chafetz Chaim is warning me, that anybody, it's not just an almana and yisayma, they happen to be the typical examples that the Torah singles out. But the Torah singles them out because it wants you to know the Sada Shav, the uniting theme here is anyone who's vulnerable, because they don't have anyone right now to advocate for them, you have to watch out not to hurt them. And so therefore in the classroom, I as a teacher have that much more responsibility to make sure, number one, safety of our children in the class, in recess, in transition from classroom to recess, transition from class to the next class, onto the bus, off the bus, on the bus. Yeah, this is our responsibility. Number 5, the Torah warns me many times not to hurt the feelings of a ger tzedek. Same idea. Someone who is more likely to be a target, got no family to protect them. Watch out. The Torah emphasizes this many times. The Torah warns me not to hurt the feelings of a non-Jewish eved, a non-Jewish servant, who ran away from his master to find refuge with the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. It's amazing. The Torah goes out of its way in so many instances. I just gave you 7, where it's absolutely clear the Torah does not want me to be a bystander who lets injustice take place to people who are vulnerable, who are easy targets. Wants me to jump in, stand up for them, advocate, defend. Don't let others attack. For sure not me, but as a bystander. So we just gave you a little bit of the context of what it means to be a bystander. We've mentioned Moshe Rabbeinu he's the king of bystanders who did something and not nothing. And look who he became. The reward is massive, beyond. The leader of the Jewish people. He received the Torah for Klal Yisrael. Torah's Moshe. Unbelievable. Everything is in his zechus. Yetziat Mitzrayim. He stood in front of Hashem kama pamim, many times begging Hashem to rescind His intention to destroy us because of what we did in our adultery under the chuppah, where Chazal tell us, Haluba kala zinta tachas baila. Right at Har Sinai, we went almost immediately with the golden calf, and Moshe Rabbeinu intercedes on our behalf. The Meraglim, Moshe Rabbeinu intercedes with Korach. He started to intercede. Every situation is trying to save us from ourselves, because we're bullying ourselves and we're complaining against Hashem. And Moshe Rabbeinu, how did he get to this? Ish Elokim. Because he was a bystander and did something about it. So, the conclusion, very simply, if we can help our children in the classroom become aware that they are always part of the majority, whenever they might see bullying taking place in any form, they are always part of the majority, and have an agreement up front how the kids will agree together that the moment one of us stands up to help another who's a target, we will all come to their side. Imagine what a difference that would make to the whole culture of bullying. It'll make it so unpopular. It's not cool for a bully to start with a target and see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus kids come to the defense of the target and shout back at the bully. He'll back off. You think he's going to continue? He can't be powerful over so many. The imbalance of power has been switched. This kid is not so weak. He's got all these people on his side. And all of a sudden, I'm the underdog. And it's not cool to be a bully. And he's not going to do it again so easily, or goes elsewhere until he learns his lesson. But this is the power of the bystander, that we can empower our children to know they're always part of the vast majority, where there's 85%, probably much more within the Frum community. Okay. We haven't looked at all examples. I didn't get to it all. Like, we didn't touch on Lashon Hara, Motzi Shemra, Oinas Dvarim. We even didn't really touch on all those. But if you start listing through the Torah which mitzvahs clearly are telling us to be very, very, very careful not to hurt other people, you start realizing that even though the Torah hasn't got the word bully in the word we know it as bully, but it has got a din of a roidef, and there are dinim of Motzi Shemra, and Lashon Hara, and Richilas, and Oinas Dvarim, Oina for an Almana, a Yisaima, and for an Eved Ivri, an Eved Kanani. It's like, whoa, so many mitzvahs relating to don't hurt the underdog. Take the side of the underdog. Don't stand by and let the underdog get oppressed, hurt, harmed. So it's quite amazing how, when we look carefully, the Torah is not mincing its words about what bullying can do to people. And yet we also know that we've got that inner resilience, that inner strength to be able to stand up for ourselves and be there for ourselves. So I'm just going to touch on a couple more examples, and then we'll close on this bystander profile. So we're still looking at the upside, if you want to call it, of the bystander, the way the Torah describes him. It has an amazing opportunity. It can either be over on many isurim, in violation of many prohibitions of al tamoid al dam re'echa, not to stand by idle when someone's blood is being spilled. He can has v'shalom be over the prohibition of listening and believing in lashon hara, or spreading rechila, spreading gossip, and thereby being accomplice to the bullying. Because now my tongue is added to the equation of swords that are hurting the heart of the victim, so to speak. There's a Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Noach, paragraph 4, that offers that there are 3 categories of people that Hashem is so upset with that He won't let them out of this world till they've paid the full price of their crime in their lifetime, besides what they're going to get in Gehenna. One is Oved Avodah Zarah, serving idols. Number 2, Gezel, stealing. And 3 is Oinas Dvarim. Amazing. Oinas Dvarim, hurting people with words that just can't get away with it. It's just, Hashem will not let that happen. He's got to pay the price, even while they're here. And I've seen it so many times where a person can destroy their employment situation because of their bad-mouthing. And even though they think it's latuelis, that doesn't make it latuelis. It doesn't suddenly make it purposeful and permitted if it's if it's bad mouthing, if it's negative, it's Einas Dvarim, if it's Motzei Shemra, if it's Rechilus, if it's Lashon Hara, there's no way it cannot bounce back. Whether it's a marriage, there's no way it's not going to bounce back. Whether it's a child, there's no way the child is not going to pay back as they hit young adolescents and teenagers. That's the way the world is. If I hurt you, I'm hurting myself. But more than I'm hurting myself, I'm creating a consequence by hurting you, because the resentment, the anger that you might fester eventually will come back to me. Like we said earlier, the last thing you want to bully is the person that ends up being in your adult life the only brain surgeon in the world who can save your life. Oh, bad news. I mean, that brain surgeon has to have not just a really good brain on his head, but a really kind-hearted person who forgives this guy who he's now cutting up and can finish with one small millimeter of the wrong movement. He's got to be really, really, it's just not worth it. It will always come back. I heard from a close friend of mine, Rav Binyamin Marvin, an amazing insight that you have when Paro wanted to know the advice of his 3 closest advisors about what to do with the Jewish people. So Bilam, the Rasha, says, let's kill them. Well, it doesn't get much more of a bully than that, drown them. And Hashem finishes him off with the sword. Make sure, hey, the bully will never get away. If he doesn't do tshuva, it's gonna come back to him. And the bystander, let's deal with him first before we get to the bystander. Oh my gosh, Eov was silent. He didn't speak up. He didn't defend. So what happened? He suffered the worst imaginable Yisurin suffering that anybody has ever had in world history in such a 12-month period. No one suffered as much as Eov. David HaMelech suffered more over a lifetime, but Eov suffered the most in a 12-month period because of his silence. He was a bystander and he had a chance to do something. And the other bystander, who did stand up and did it in an interesting way, Yisro, if he said anything, he knew, if he hadn't said anything to defend the Jewish people, he would be finished and it wouldn't be listened to anyway. So his protest, he's standing up against them, was he ran away. He's running away. He's a top minister, paid very, very well, has his own entourage of servants and who else knows what. He runs away. Now that's a busha to Paro. But it's a statement as well. I'm not going to be part of this and I don't agree. And how does he show he doesn't agree? He ran away. What was his reward? He becomes the father-in-law of the greatest bystander in world history, the man of action, the star of the show, Moshe Rabbeinu. Yisro, in his, look at that beautiful Middah Keneged Middah. What an insight. Thank you, Rav Binyamin Marvin, for that. This is the power of, I've got a choice. I can be a bystander and say nothing. Be silent. And there's a price for that. Because I'm accomplice to this. I'm essentially giving permission. I'm essentially not standing up, so I'm saying it's okay. No, it's not okay. Or I can make a choice to be in the company of a Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu's wife, Sipora, the daughter of Yisro. That's amazing. So you look at all these pieces together and you start to get the picture of the great invitation for greatness that you are invited to become through not being silent as a bystander. And let the 85+% of your class know that they can always squash the bullying by them shouting out, no bullying in this class, period, not negotiable. And when they stand up for how do the kids feel if they know in advance that if Chas v'Shalom I'm picked on, my whole class is going to be on my side? You're setting up the children in advance with this inner security that I'm part of a safe environment. But you're also helping them understand that even though that's plan B, plan A is the resilience that you want the kid to reveal from inside out. Over here, bystanders coming to you, that's great, but it's still outside in. It's still really good, and you want that because the Torah completely validates, supports that, and gives us mitzvahs of how to do that. The ultimate resilience is internal, inside out. There's much more to be said on this, but let's move on. Another part of this is that bystanders who are actually friends of the target and stand up for their friend, that's very powerful, because a secondary treatment, the first one would always be the internal resilience, but the secondary treatment, as I would call it for bullying, a real cure is friendship. Chazal tell us, Gemara on Tanis Taf Chaf Aleph, Oy Chavrusa Oy Masusa. The famous story of Chaynia Magal over there that slept for 70 years, and when he woke up, no one knew him, and his own son, own children had passed away, his grandson was alive, but it became very clear that no one believed him, that he was really the original Chaynia Magal, since hadn't been around for 70 years, and it reached a point where he didn't want to live, because if he couldn't give and share and be appreciated, what was life worth living for? And Chazal actually conclude over there, Oy chavrusa, oy masusa, either friendship or death. We're not in this world to be alone. We're in this world to share. We're in this world to collaborate. We're in this world to be team members. We're in this world to give and take and build together. It's olam chesed. You can't do chesed on your own. I mean, there is such a concept of taking care of yourself, but ultimately, the chesed you're doing for other people, that's what's bain olam. That's what's building society, building the world. So comes along Chazal and tell us, Oy chavrusa o mesusa. And in that context, we can understand that some kids do have poor social skills. There are some children who are a little bit on the spectrum of Asperger's and don't pick up on social cues, and they become more easily targeted as vulnerable for not being socially inept and skillful, and they can even fall. Also, kids who are not strong in their social skills could fall into the trap of actually believing, I actually don't have any friends, or I can't have friends, I can't make friends. And then they also are becoming candidates for being bullies. So friendship, boys in the class, girls in their class, making friends with each other, and the Rebbe, the Mora, talking about this in the context of bullying, how important it is to be there for each other. And especially kids who are not always strong in their social skills, we still have to be 100% loving, appreciative of their virtues and their qualities and their mitzvos tovos, their ineptness in social interaction does not equal an invitation to put them down. Helping kids feel befriended is such a big mitzvah, because the child who otherwise might conclude, I have no friends, I can't make friends, no one likes me, people hate me, I have no friends, especially for girls, this is the worst. Those thoughts are so debilitating. They break a person so much that it's so, therefore, important for us to help our children recognize that being a friend is potentially saving a life. You don't have to put it necessarily in those words, but it really is. It's important, because then the child who you befriend, who himself doesn't believe I'm worthy of friendship, now says, hey, I am worthy of friendship. Oh, I do have friends. I'm not a loser after all. And I think most of us, I feel bad to have to include myself. I remember as a kid, there was one child in my class who was the scapegoat of the class, and I was a bystander. And he was ridiculed, and he got used to it. But that's not good. It may have been his way of coping with it, but he got used to being the scapegoat. Maybe it helped him become more thick-skinned. I was extremely happy to meet him on an underground in the tube that's in England many years ago. I would say about 20 years after we left school. I saw him on the underground, and I couldn't believe it was him. And I said, how are you doing? I was like so happy to meet him alone when no one else was around, and ask what's going on. I was so happy to hear that he had become an assistant to a very famous chef in France and was just coming back that day from France, in fact. I was so happy that I had the opportunity to show my appreciation for meeting him after so many years. And even though he often was on my football team and he was always picked last, I'm ashamed that now I realize I was a bystander in my own classroom. And I think that might be the case for many people when we start paying attention. Oh my gosh, I have been a bystander in different scenarios, whether it was in yeshiva, whether it was in a college, or whether it was even in elementary. I'm talking about here elementary school till about 15, 16. From 10 years old to 17, 16, 17. That's how I remember he was the scapegoat and I was silent. I did not stand up for him. So recognizing who a bystander is, and sometimes it can be us, and realizing what is my role. The Torah has put out the prescription real loud and clear. And with that, we should be zeicha to help our children be mischaber. Chaver is from Lashon of chibur, which means to join, to come together. And that the whole concept, which we'll talk about much later on, is community. The word for community in Hebrew is tzibur. And tzibur is the famous Rashi Tevas, the famous letters, tzadik, beis, reish. Tzadik refers to tzaddikim. You've got the elite, so to speak, and the beinanim, people who are not always in control of themselves. And then you've got rishayim. But the Rishayim are part of the Tzibur. Oh, so community means we actually get along with differences. So being friendly with the kids in the class who are not always the most popular is something to encourage as part of preparing our children for adulthood. Okay, we're going to go to number 13 next, your relationship with your child and your student, and how to build rapport so that he's more likely to talk to you and turn to you, or she is more likely to turn to you if there's any bullying going on in their lives, but they feel close enough to you to be able to open up so you can help them. Hold on tight.